Hey guys, welcome to Telling the Told and Untold. My name is Tshego. As most of us know, June is Pride Month, so I have decided to cover cases that have happened in the LGBTQIA+ community. So if there are any specific cases you would like me to cover this month, please leave them in the case suggestion link that I have down in the description box below. Before we go straight into today's video, I do have to give you guys a couple of content warnings. In this video, I do talk about assault and suicide. However, I don't go into too much detail about either of them, but still, if that's not something you think you're interested in watching, then this video probably isn't for you. So maybe you can check out some of my other videos or just wait for my next upload. Today I'm going to be telling you guys about Anisha and Joey van Niekerk. There isn't much information about how either of them grew up, but what I can tell you is that on the 5th of November 2014, the pair got married, and after this, Anisha bought a plot of land in Mooinooi, which is in the northwest, and Mooinooi is described as a small farming community and everyone just knows everyone. Both of their families were really accepting of their relationship, and Anisha's brother says that she could just tell they were going to be life partners. They just loved each other so much. They were so respectful in their relationship, and anytime they would walk into the room, they would just light it up. Joey had two siblings. Their names were Rina and Lawrence, and when they were younger, their parents did get a divorce, and after this, Joey's father did have full custody of the three children, but they would still go see their mother all the time. And their father was, because like he was their primary caregiver, he was just like their everything. They looked up to him, he was their hero. But unfortunately, on the 4th of December 2017, he passed away. He passed away that Monday, and then that Saturday, Joey decided to invite her sister Rina, her brother-in-law Kobus, and their children to their house, like the plot of land that they had bought, and they were just going to set up a presentation that they were going to show the church of pictures of their father, and then they decided to have a braai. So they were braaiing, they were drinking, they were listening to their dad's favorite songs, you know, just like mourning and celebrating life. And they did this that whole like Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, and Lawrence was also there. I'm not too sure when he left, but later in the night, Kobus decided to call it a night, so he went to bed in one of the bedrooms, and he went to bed with his children as well, and he left Rina, Joey, and Anisha outside, and they still continued drinking, partying, like mourning, crying, and yeah. The next morning, on the 10th of December, around 6:30 to 7 a.m., Kobus, Rina, and their children decided to go home. So they said their goodbyes to Anisha and Joey, and they went home. Not too long after that, they decided to call the couple and just check on them, but they didn't answer the phone. But they didn't think it was strange or anything, because they were like, you know what, they spent the whole of Saturday like drinking, partying, so they're probably just tired. Also, it's a Sunday, so they're probably just like resting, you know, they don't want to be bothered, and they just left it at that. Monday rolled around and the couple still weren't answering their phones, and this is when panic started setting in. Anisha's brother, they received a phone call from their younger brother, and he called Anisha's brother to let him know that he was worried because Anisha and Joey hadn't showed up for the appointment that they had that day. So they had an appointment at a funeral home in Pretoria, which is about an hour and a half away from Mooinooi, and the appointment was set between, I think, 10 and 11 a.m. So they waited there until around 12, and the couple still hadn't shown up, and that's when they just left the appointment and still kept trying to call them, and still both of them didn't answer their phones. Then at around 1 a.m, Kobus decided to call Lawrence and told him that, no, listen, something is wrong. We have to go to Anisha and Joey's house and just check on them and just make sure that they're okay. So Kobus went to their like house, the plot of land, and once he got there, he couldn't get onto the property because there was a gate, and this gate was locked, and he also couldn't tell whether their cars were there. So Anisha had a Nissan X-Trail and Joey had a Suzuki. Yeah, Eventually, Quibus managed to get onto the property. I'm not too sure how. And then he got the help of Quis Stredom, who I'll talk about just now. So Quis also lived on the same property that Anisha and Joey lived on. So they had like, I think there were like 3 buildings next to their like house, and those buildings they rented out. So Quibus got Quis to help him look around the house. So they went around the house, they were looking, and nothing really jumped out to them, but Quibus did notice that Joey's new handbag that she had bought just a week earlier, as well as a pair of new shoes that she had gotten, were still in the house. About 4 or 5 hours after searching the house, Quibus called Lawrence and told him that he was at the Mooinooi police station and he was opening up a missing persons report for both Joey and Anisha van Niekerk. And immediately the police took this missing persons report very serious, and all the information they had was that they were last seen on Sunday. They weren't answering either of their phones. One car was missing, and that was about it. But they still took it pretty serious and started investigating and trying to find the couple. Monday night, this is when the family decided to call Quis Stridom and just ask him if he had any information. So as I mentioned earlier, Quis is the one that helped them search the house, and Quis had a panel beating shop on the property, and he's described as someone like that you couldn't trust. He has prison tattoos all over his arms and by his eye, and he's also been described as a very like dodgy character. Yeah, like he just wasn't someone that you'd look at and be like, I could use your help, or like you'd be very helpful, you know what I mean? When they asked Quis if he had any information for them, he said that he last saw the couple that same Monday at around 9 a.m. at a petrol station, and he saw them in a Toyota Legend with 2 other women. And he says he knew one of the women, he had seen her before, not necessarily like knew what her name was or anything like that, but her face was familiar because he had seen her at Anisha and Joey's house before. And then he said that Joey asked if he could go to their house quickly and fetch her phone for him because she had left it. So he did that, and then he returned and gave her this phone that she wanted, and then they left, and that's the last time that he saw them. Immediately after hearing this, the family went to that same petrol station and they just wanted to see if they had any CCTV footage, and if they did, they asked if they could watch it and see if they could see Anisha or Joey on it, as well as this Toyota Legend. And after looking at the CCTV footage that the petrol station had, there was no indication that they had been at this petrol station, and there was no Toyota Legend there at around the same time that Quis said he last saw them. Quis's story would constantly change, and the family noticed this and they thought it was very odd, and this is when they started suspecting that maybe he had something to do with their disappearance, or he knew more than he was letting on. By the 12th of December, police officers had already set up 2 task teams to look for Anisha and Joey van Niekerk. Police officers also decided that they wanted to start searching for the woman, so they asked their families to join them in the search. And this was just because in case they found any evidence linking to the 2 women, the family would be able to identify it, and would also kind of just like speed up the process. So they decided to go first searching on Quis's farm. So Quis had a farm where his family and workers stayed, and it wasn't too far away from his panel beating shop that was on Anisha and Joey's property. So police officers got there and they just noticed how strange it was. Like there were high walls surrounding the whole farm, which they thought was very weird for like a farm, you know. It also had a lookout tower, which is very strange for a farm, and you couldn't access it from the outside. You have to be like inside the home to access this lookout tower. They also noticed there was this weird area sort of that had like 2 walls and a pavement that led outside of Quis's property that had like a little gate. So they looked at it and they went there just trying to see what they could find, and immediately as soon as they got off of Quis's property, which really wasn't like that much of a distance, they noticed that something had recently been burned. Like it was a huge fire, and someone had also tried to clean it up. And also as they were looking around, they saw that there was a grave that had recently been dug, and they thought it was very odd. And Anisha's brother remembers as soon as he saw this grave, he just, like, reality just set in, and he thought there was a real possibility that, you know, Gwis had done something to his sister and sister-in-law. And they asked him, like, why there was a grave there, and he just said that one of his horses had died a week before, so they had dug out this grave to bury the horse in. Police officers also went to go search the couple's home, and everything looked normal, but a couple of things did stand out to them. Number one was that the dishes weren't washed. I'm not too sure why that stood out. Maybe because it showed that they left but they were coming back, or I'm not sure, maybe they were like very clean people, so dishes were always done. They also noticed that their vanity case hadn't been packed with like all their toiletries and stuff. Their toothbrushes were still there, so it's not like they had left and weren't coming back for a couple of days. It's like everything that was in the home was supposed to be there, and it didn't indicate that they had left and were planning on being gone for a while, if I'm making sense. So earlier in the video, I mentioned that on Anisha and Joey's property, they had two other buildings that were being rented out by tenants. The first tenant was Gwis, and there was another tenant that rented out one of the buildings, like made it their little home. So police officers went to this tenant and just started asking them like questions, just trying to figure out if they had any information for them. And this tenant told them that he last saw Anisha's Nissan X-Trail next door, which was at Gwis's paddle beating store on Sunday. So the day the two women were last seen. At this point, police officers had called both families in to let them know about all the information they had gathered up until that point, and they also just wanted to let the families know that they thought it was a high possibility that Joey and Anisha van Niekerk had been murdered. So up to this point, police officers had been investigating, and immediately after the investigation started, I think on the 11th of December, they had found Anisha's Nissan X-Trail. It was found in Magaliesburg, and it had been completely burnt, like someone had set it alight on purpose. The second thing is that when they went searching at the couple's home, they did find the phone that Gwis had apparently given to them that Monday. And immediately, as soon as they found this phone, they saw that there were messages coming in, and these messages indicated that their bank cards had been used to withdraw money as well as to make large purchases. So some of these purchases included them buying cell phones, they bought a TV, it was used to buy groceries, as well as some alcohol. After discovering that their bank cards had been used, police officers tried to find the location where these purchases were made, and it led them to a couple of shopping complexes in a neighboring community, but it isn't like a community that Anisha and Joey would go to, so this immediately stood out to them. It was like those shopping complexes in like townships, and they don't think that Joey and Anisha would go out of their way to go to those townships, because they also had like stores closer to them, and they also weren't known to go do their shopping there. So once they discovered these shopping complexes, they looked at CCTV footage, and on the CCTV footage they saw the person using the card as well as the people that he was shopping with. And CCTV footage also showed them a car that the person was driving, and it was a Nissan Sentra. And after this, they kind of like followed CCTV footage like on the route they thought they would be driving on, and they saw that this car stopped at a petrol station to pour petrol, and the card was also used there. And once they got to the petrol station, they looked at that CCTV footage, and it was so clear that they managed to see the number plates. And as soon as they got this number plates, they looked it up and they found the owner. The owner of the Nissan Sentra was Colin Mudau. So police officers managed to track him down, and immediately he confessed to them and told them that he was the one that was using the bank cards. However, he didn't know that the bank cards were stolen. He told police officers that he was given the bank cards by his uncle named Alex Mudau, and he says that on Saturday night, if I'm not mistaken, he went to go pick up his uncle Alex Mudau, and as soon as he picked him up, Alex gave him like these 2 cards and told him, you know what, I've been paid, I have money, like let's go shopping type thing. And then he also told the police officers that he also found out that the cards not only belonged to Alex but belonged to 2 of his co-workers, and their names were James and Jack Sithole. James and Jack Sithole were brothers from Mozambique, and police officers also discovered that all 3 men were working for a man, and his name was Koos Strydom. Colin then led police officers to James and Jack, and both of them tried running away, but fortunately police officers managed to arrest Jack. James, on the other hand, managed to escape, and he ran up into the mountains. And then later that night, police officers decided to return and just wait by the mountains that James had ran up into, and because they knew that he had to come down eventually, like he couldn't stay there forever, so they were just waiting for him to come down so that they could arrest him. And eventually he did come down, but he had disguised himself as a woman. He had put in like these fake boobs, he had a wig on, he was dressed as a woman, and immediately police officers saw him and they were like, you're not gonna get away with this, we know who you are. And that's when they arrested him. After Alex found out that James and Jack had been arrested, he also ran away, but the next day, I don't know, maybe he felt guilty or he just thought he would get arrested at some point, he decided to turn himself in. So now police officers have managed to arrest Alex, James, Jack, and Colin. However, Colin was released because it was discovered that he really didn't know that the bank cards had been stolen, and yeah, he had used the cards because his uncle had told him to use it, but he had no part in it. Not too long after having been arrested, Jack decided to give police officers a full confession, and his confession led police officers to Vincent Strydom, who was Koos's son, as well as Mariska Opperman, who was Vincent's girlfriend, and they had been hiding out at Mariska's mom's farm. Then on the 31st of December 2017, almost 20 days after Anisha and Joey had first been reported missing, Mariska Opperman pointed police officers to where they could find their bodies. After this, police officers all gathered by the area. It was like a very bushy area next to a road, and police officers held hands, walked into the area, and immediately they found a white plastic bag, and when they opened it, they found burnt pieces of a body or bodies. Anisha and Joey's families were then called into the police station, and police officers asked if they could take some DNA swabs from them because they had found something related to the case, and I'm sure their families already knew that it wasn't going to be good news. The skeletal remains were then taken to a forensic anthropologist, and she noticed that there were so many pieces of bones, however they couldn't make up a full body. But as she was looking at these pieces of burnt like bones, she noticed that there were 2 femurs from the left side, which indicated that these skeletal remains belonged to 2 people, not one as she had initially thought. DNA evidence then came back positive, and it identified some of the remains belonging to Anisha. However, it couldn't confirm that the other skeletal remains belonged to Joey van Niekerk. During Jack's confession, he confirmed that both Joey and Anisha van Niekerk had been taken to Koos Strydom's farm, and this is where they were killed and burned. After hearing this information, police officers went to go arrest Koos Strydom. Vincent, Koos's son, says that the Strydom family basically ruled Rustenburg. I should know, I'm from Rustenburg, and I've never heard of them before this case, but you know, probably just ruled like certain parts of Rustenburg. But anyways, he says that their family ruled Rustenburg, so because of this, like, his father could get away with anything. Like, he knew the right people, so even if he was arrested for something, he would never be like convicted and sentenced for those things. And his father was also very persuasive, so he could get anyone to agree to anything. You know, that's just the type of person that his father Gwis was. Also, his father had a second wife, and her name was Mersha Stredo. And at the time of this case in 2017, she was only 20 years old, and they already had one child together. I should note that, like, she's 20, and Gwis is like old. Like, she was younger than his own son, you know? Like, that's the age gap. That's the age gap. But also, after Gwis and Mersha got together and got married, apparently Gwis became even worse than he already was. They were both just like feeding into each other, like this toxic relationship. As police officers were investigating, they were trying to figure out what would be the motive for Gwis wanting to have Anisha and Joey murdered. And it was discovered that in November, a month before the couple was killed, they went to Durban to go visit Joey's mom. That's where she lived. And they told her that they basically just wanted to sell their plot of land and wanted to move to Durban to just start a new life, open up a new business, maybe like a cash and carry or something like that. And they just wanted to start over. And Joey's mom asked if they had told like her dad that they were planning on selling this plot of land, and they said no, they wanted to keep it a secret. They didn't want him to know, and I'm just assuming it's because he wouldn't be happy that they wanted to sell like such a large piece of land, you know. But they kept it a secret from him, and he never knew. Apparently one of Joey and Anisha's tenants heard that they wanted to sell the plot of land, so he went up to them and he offered them 1.3 million rand for it. However, they declined this offer and said that they wanted to sell it for 1.7 million, and the reason was because they still owed the bank some money for like a bond or something like that, so they couldn't afford to sell it for any less. And somehow Gwis also found out about them wanting to sell this plot of land, and as I mentioned earlier, Gwis was said to be very persuasive, so somehow he had managed to like persuade them to sell the land to him. On the 7th of December, Gwis and Anisha were discussing the contract for selling this plot of land, and this is when Gwis decided to call his lawyer, and his name was Adrian Nall, and he had been the Stredom's family's lawyer for decades, but he mainly represented Gwis. So they called him up, he showed up at the house, and they basically told him that they want like Anisha and Joey wanted to sell this plot of land, and he was like, okay, I'm busy, so like I can't draft up the contract right now, but let me just take out a piece of paper, let me just make some notes about what you guys agree on. And then on Monday, so the day that the women were reported missing, they were supposed to all meet up so he could draft this contract officially and they would sign it. And in this contract, he had written in his notes that they were selling it for 2 million, and Gwis told Anisha that he would give her 1 million rand in cash once they signed the contract, because he already had it, like it wasn't a problem for him to give them this 1 million rand. And Adrian asked Anisha if she was fine with this. She said yes, and he said, all right, I'll see you guys Monday, and that was the end of it. During police officers' investigation, they also found another man that worked for Gwis, and his name was Moses Rakuba. And he met Gwis whilst he was working at AA Windscreens, and Gwis asked if he wanted a job, and he said yes. At this point, Moses had been driving around, I think like a truck, but he didn't have a license, so Gwis wanting him to work, like Gwis wanting him to work for him. Gwis wanting him to work for him. Yes, he thought like it was a great opportunity, he would make more money and just things like that. So basically they would transport like paint cans that had aluminium in them, and then after the cans had been used, they would take them back and take them to the panel beating store. On the 10th of December, Gwis called up Moses and told them to come to the panel beating shop. So Moses went there, and immediately once he got there, Gwis told him that he had one of his customers' cars on his farm and that he should go there. So after this, Marisha, Gwis's wife, drove both Moses and Alex to the farm. After dropping the two off on the farm, Marisha then went to run a couple of errands, and she went to go buy pool acid, rope, and she also went to an internet cafe, and this is where she asked one of the workers to just type out something for her, and this was basically a contract. Joey and Anisha went to Gwis's farm because they thought that they were going to sign the contract for selling their plot of land. However, once they got there, it wasn't what they expected. Immediately, Alex and Jack took Joey into a container that Gwis had on his farm, and then Moses and James took Anisha into the house. So whilst Joey was in the container, it is said that Jack sexually assaulted her, and afterwards, while they were busy torturing both women, like one was in the house, one was in the container, they were being tortured and tied up. Somehow Joey had convinced Jack to call Gwis. So Gwis received a phone call from Jack, and it was Joey on the phone, and she was basically just like pleading with him and telling him that, you know what, you don't have to do this, there's other ways for us to resolve this, you know, like you don't have to resort to this. And this is when Gwis decided to leave his panel beating store and go to the farm, and Marisha had somehow overheard this conversation, and she told Gwis that it's too late now, like we can't let them go, because if we do, we're going to get in trouble. And this is when Gwis decided that, you know, she's right, and then he told the men that they had to kill the woman. The men then went looking for wires, and once they found them, they decided to tie a noose with the wires they had found, as well as a rope that Marisha had bought. So Joey was already in the container, and the container had hooks on top of it, so they decided to put the noose around her neck and like put the wire rope through the hook and try to hang Joey. But however, this container wasn't that long, so like she could basically stand, like she couldn't hang because it wasn't that high, like you know. But this is when they decided to come up with another plan. So one person would basically like push on her chest to kind of like make her fall back, and another person would like pull the rope, and this would choke her. And this is what they did to Joey. And once she was deceased, they went inside the house, they got Anisha, and they proceeded to do the same thing. After the two women were dead, Jack told the men that, you know, we can't leave them like this, we have to like burn them. So this is when they decided to take a dustbin, like those huge municipality dustbins, and they took them to the area just off of Gwis's property, the one that police officers had discovered earlier on in the investigation that had been burnt. So they took the bin there, and then they put Joey's body inside. They went to get Anisha's body, put her body on top of Joey's, and then they put firewood on top of their bodies and doused their bodies in petrol and then lit it up. And after this, they then got Vincent's girlfriend, Mariska, to put the bodies in a plastic bag and then dump them. Gwis then went to his son Vincent at around 11:30 that evening, and once he got there, he told Vincent to drive the car, and afterwards they followed each other until they were about 20 kilometers away from Randfontein. And after this is when Gwis said Joey Suzuki alight, and they just left the car there, and that's where it was found the next day. There was so many people involved in this case, and it was Gwis, his son Vincent, Vincent's girlfriend Mariska, there was Marisha, who was Gwis's wife, there were Gwis's workers, Moses, Alex, Jack, and James. So literally 8 people involved in this case. However, it was like Gwis was the mastermind behind it, and police officers knew it would be very difficult to prosecute all of them, especially Gwis, because Gwis was the type of person to tell people what they should do and not get his hands dirty type of thing, so that he couldn't be like convicted or like linked to it, you know, or they wouldn't have enough evidence to convict him because he didn't he didn't do anything, you know. So they knew that in order for them to get enough evidence to prosecute all of them, especially because they needed to have state witnesses. And I don't know how, but somehow they managed to convince Moses to become a state witness. And also the reason why Moses wanted to become a state witness is because he felt really bad about what he had done, and he thought this would kind of be like his redemption, you know. Vincent also decided to become a state witness because he didn't want to be a part of it. He didn't want to go to jail for his father's crimes. And at some point whilst they were in prison, his father literally told Vincent to take all the blame, to say that he's the one that did it, and his father told him that he would take care of him whilst he was in prison. And I'm assuming because Vincent decided to become a state witness, his girlfriend Mariska also decided to become a state witness, so now the state had 3 witnesses. Somehow Gus found out about these state witnesses, and Moses had to move prisons. So whilst Gus was putting out this hit on the witnesses, including his own son, Marisha, his wife, was out on bail, so he was still in prison. And there's literally footage of him telling her what to do, as well as the man, the one that's recording it. I'm not too sure like what his part is in it, or if he was the hitman or what, but there is literal footage of him wanting, like, putting out a hit on these witnesses. But he didn't manage to like get to them, and the trial proceeded. And after Vincent and Moses took the stand, Gus just lost his mind. He started shouting at his lawyer because somehow, like, I don't know why, but his lawyer told him that they wouldn't get on the stand and they wouldn't be state witnesses, but they were, and he wasn't having this. And after their little fight, the lawyer decided to ask for a postponement in the trial. Then on the 20th of September 2009, Gus Strydom was rushed to hospital after wardens found him unconscious in his cell, and he had committed suicide. Court proceedings then carried on for almost 3 years until sentencing in the Pretoria High Court on the 15th of October 2020. James Sithole, 37, Jack Sithole, who was 21, Alex Mudau, who was 39, and Marisha Strydom, who was 24, were found guilty on multiple charges, including murder, rape, robbery with aggravating circumstances, kidnapping, theft, defeating the ends of justice, and the unlawful possession of firearms and ammunition. Marisha Strydom and Alex Mudau received 2 life sentences, while the 2 brothers, James and Jack Sithole, each received 4 life sentences. Vincent and his girlfriend Mariska Opperman, as well as Moses Rakabu, were not convicted because they became state witnesses. And apparently in our constitution, if you become like a state witness, you can't be convicted because you helped the state. And that's it for today's case. If you guys have any comments, please leave them down below. And please don't forget to suggest any cases you have for me in the case suggestion link in the description box below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!